Have you ever stopped to think about how much food shapes who we are, not just as individuals, but as communities, as entire cultures? Imagine a table where what is served is not just food, but stories. Stories that span centuries, connecting faith, identity, and purpose. Now think of something intriguing. Why do some religious traditions avoid certain foods, while others embrace them? For example, why do Jews and Muslims not eat pork, but Christians do so without restrictions? Is it a health issue, culture, or something even deeper? This question transports us to a universe where food is not just a biological necessity, but a spiritual and cultural expression. Since antiquity, dietary practices have played a central role in how peoples connect with the divine and differentiate themselves from one another. Food is much more than something to sustain the body. It reflects values, symbolism, and often a connection to something greater. I will share something fascinating with you. Thousands of years ago, when nomadic peoples began to organize into communities, food was more than survival. It was an act of faith. In the case of the Jews, for example, the dietary laws described in Leviticus were part of a call to holiness, a separation that made them unique among the surrounding nations. Pork, among other foods, was considered impure, a daily reminder that even the most mundane choices like what to eat had spiritual implications. And for Muslims, the guidelines of the Quran also establish the importance of eating halal foods, that is, permitted by Allah. These practices reinforce discipline and purity, central elements of the Islamic faith. Eating, in this case, is an extension of devotion, a constant reminder that even the simplest moments of life are opportunities to connect with the divine. But what about Christians? The perspective changes radically. With the arrival of Jesus and his teachings, the emphasis shifts from external rules to the purity of the heart. In the Acts of the Apostles, for example, there is a moment when Peter has a vision that redefines dietary practices. It is not what enters the body that makes someone impure, but what comes out of the heart. This new approach symbolized an openness that allowed Christianity to reach people of all cultures and traditions. What does all this mean for us today? In a globalized world, where different cultures and religions coexist side by side, dietary practices still hold the power to unite or divide. More than that, they offer a window to understand the history, values, and meanings that shape societies. So, when we sit at the table, we are not just eating, we are sharing stories, identities, and connections that span generations. And that is exactly what we are going to explore here. How these practices were born, evolved, and continue to shape the world around us. Get ready for a journey that starts with food on the plate, but takes us straight to the heart of what it means to be human. Now that you are intrigued about how food transcends the role of mere sustenance, let's dive into the first tradition we will explore, Judaism. And believe me, this story is so rich in meaning that you will see kosher food in a completely different way. Imagine being at a Shabbat dinner. The table is set with braided challah bread, kosher wine, and dishes that strictly follow the laws described in the Torah. Does it just seem like dinner? Not for an observant Jew. Each item on this table carries a spiritual purpose. But how did these rules come about, and what do they really mean? Everything begins with a calling. In the book of Leviticus, God commands the Israelites to be holy because he is holy. And this holiness is not reserved only for the temple or for religious rituals, but permeates every aspect of life, including what is eaten. It's as if each meal were an act of faith, a constant reminder of the covenant between God and his people. Did you know that kosher laws, or kashrut, are not just about which foods can or cannot be consumed, but also about how they are prepared? For example, the meat must be slaughtered quickly and compassionately, minimizing the animal's suffering. This is not just a rule, it is an expression of respect for divine creation. Moreover, mixing meat and milk is prohibited, a practice that symbolizes the separation between life and death, between the sacred and the mundane. But what really impresses is how these laws go beyond spirituality and touch practical life. Thousands of years ago, before the understanding of microbes or foodborne diseases, kosher rules already protected the Israelites. Avoiding the meat of animals considered impure, such as pork, helped prevent diseases like trichinosis. Thus, kashrut was, at the same time, an act of faith and an advanced public health system for its time. Today, these practices continue to unite Jewish communities around the world. And more than that, they help preserve an identity that has survived centuries of diaspora and adversity. It's as if each kosher meal were a link to past generations, an act of cultural and spiritual resistance. But in such a diverse world, you might wonder, do these practices still make sense? The answer lies in how kashrut adapts to modern times. Today, it is possible to find vegan kosher products, gluten-free, and even adapted for low-calorie diets. And even more interesting, the kosher market is expanding, with non-Jewish consumers adopting these foods because they consider them healthier or more ethical. And here's an interesting fact. The global kosher market generates billions of dollars a year, and famous brands like Coca-Cola have kosher certification to reach a wider audience. This shows how an ancient tradition is still relevant in today's world, but our journey is just beginning. In the next segment, we will explore dietary practices in Islam, another tradition rich in symbolism and discipline. Before we proceed, I want to thank you for being here with me. Your interest in learning and connecting with other cultures is inspiring. If you are enjoying the video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your opinion in the comments. I want to know, have you ever tried any kosher food? How was that experience? I am eager to read what you have to say. Continuing our journey, we left the Shabbat table and now walk through the vibrant streets of a Middle Eastern market. Imagine the colors, the aromas, and the sounds. It is here that we find another food tradition, rich in symbolism and discipline. Halal foods, followed by Muslims around the world. Just like in Judaism, what is placed on a Muslim's plate is much more than a culinary choice. It is a direct reflection of faith, obedience, and connection with God. But what exactly does halal mean? The word halal comes from Arabic and means permitted or lawful. In the Quran, the guidelines on halal and haram, forbidden foods, are clear. Pork, for example, is strictly prohibited, as well as any meat that has not been slaughtered according to Islamic rituals. But what makes halal slaughter so special? It's not just about following rules, it's about respect and awareness. In Islam, halal slaughter includes a prayer that acknowledges God's sovereignty over creation, as well as practices that minimize the animal's suffering. For a Muslim, eating halal food is a way to live in harmony with divine will. It is a constant reminder that even the simplest acts, like eating, can be a form of worship. And here's an interesting fact. The concept of dietary purity in Islam is not limited to what is consumed, but also to how it is obtained. This means that halal food must also be free from corruption and exploitation. For example, products that involve slave labor or unfair exploitation may not be considered truly halal. This concern for social justice is one of the reasons why halal has become an ethical standard admired by many, including non-Muslims. Now, did you know that the halal market is one of the fastest growing sectors in the world? According to a recent report, the global halal food market is expected to reach over $2 trillion by 2027. This is not just a matter of numbers, It is a reflection of the ongoing relevance of these practices, even in such a diverse world. And here's what is truly fascinating. Many famous brands, such as Nestlé and Unilever, have halal product lines. This demonstrates how an ancient religious practice continues to shape the modern economy, bringing cultures closer together and breaking down barriers. Moreover, events such as halal food fairs and halal cuisine at international festivals promote greater understanding between cultures. However, halal is not just about food, it's about community. In many Muslim countries, sharing a halal meal with friends and family is an act of unity. And in multicultural societies, the halal practice helps create inclusive spaces where people from different backgrounds can come together and respect each other. But you must be wondering, why so many rules for something as simple as eating? The answer lies in Islamic philosophy, which sees every human act, even the most mundane, as an opportunity to demonstrate gratitude and devotion to God. And this connection between food, faith, and community is what leads us to the next stage of our journey. And now we have reached a turning point in this journey. After exploring how dietary practices connect Jews and Muslims to the divine, it is time to understand how Christianity brought a completely new perspective. Have you ever stopped to think about what food freedom means? In Christianity, this idea goes far beyond just eating whatever you want. It is a declaration of faith, inclusion, and transformation. But let's go back to the beginning. In Judaism and Islam, dietary laws are central to religious practice. In Christianity, however, there was a significant change. This happened because of a significant moment recorded in the Book of Acts of the Apostles, chapter 10. It is there that we find Peter, one of Jesus' closest disciples, having a vision that would forever change the way Christians viewed food. In the vision, Peter sees a large sheet descending from heaven, full of all kinds of animals, including those considered unclean according to the Mosaic law. A divine voice says, "Get up, Peter, kill and eat." Peter hesitates, for he knows that the law forbids it. But the voice responds, "Do not call anything impure that God has made clean." This event was not just about food, it was a symbol of inclusion. God was showing that, just as the foods previously considered unclean were now allowed, salvation was open to everyone, Jews and Gentiles. With this, Christianity took a step beyond dietary rules and began to emphasize something much deeper, the purity of the heart. As Jesus taught in Mark 7, nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them. This vision freed Christians from the dietary restrictions of the Old Covenant, highlighting that true spirituality lies in actions, intentions, and inner transformation. But what does this mean in the modern world? Today, this dietary freedom is a hallmark of Christianity and a reflection of its adaptability. This flexibility allowed the Christian faith to expand across various cultures, embracing distinct food, traditions, and promoting unity and diversity. However, this freedom comes with responsibility. In 1 Corinthians 8, Paul teaches that Christians should consider the impact of their choices on others. For example, if eating meat sacrificed to idols scandalized a brother in faith, it was better to avoid it. This principle is still valid today. Freedom should never be used to hurt or divide, but to build communities based on love and empathy. And here's an interesting detail. While dietary restrictions have been relaxed, food remains a powerful symbol in Christianity. Think of the Lord's Supper, or Eucharist, where bread and wine are used to remember the sacrifice of Jesus. It is a moment when food takes on a deeply spiritual dimension, connecting Christians to one another and to God. This emphasis on freedom and transformation is what makes Christianity so universal. He reminds us that true holiness is not in the plate, but in the heart. And more than that, it challenges us to use our freedom to build bridges, respect differences, and live in love. We have reached the end of our journey, but it is here that the reflections deepen and the connections become more evident. Throughout this video, we explore how food is much more than a simple physical necessity. It is a powerful symbol of identity, faith, and culture. Now it is time to bring all these elements together and reflect on what they mean in an increasingly connected world, but still marked by so many divisions. Do you remember how we started? Talking about the table as a place of stories, a space where traditions meet and differences can be celebrated. What we learned throughout this conversation is that, regardless of our beliefs, eating practices teach us something universal. The act of eating is not just physical. It is spiritual, cultural, and even political. When we talk about Judaism, we see how kosher laws connect Jews to their history and faith, preserving an identity that has withstood the test of time and adversity. In Islam, we learned that the concept of halal is not just about what one eats, but about how one lives, with justice, respect, and reverence for the divine. And in Christianity, we explore the transformative idea that true purity comes from the heart, not from what enters the body. Together, these traditions show that food is, at the same time, a means of separation and of union. And here is something fascinating. Even in their differences, these practices share common values. Holiness, gratitude, and respect are pillars that traverse the three traditions. And in today's world, these practices also offer us a unique opportunity for dialogue and learning. Think about it. While religious divisions often dominate debates, culinary traditions have the potential to build bridges. After all, who doesn't like to share a good meal? But how does this apply to our daily lives? In a globalized world, food traditions are more visible than ever. Kosher and halal food markets are growing not only in religious communities, but also among people seeking ethical and healthy alternatives. Moreover, movements like slow food and conscious consumption resonate with the values of respect and care that we find in these traditions. Here's an interesting fact. According to recent reports, the halal market is expected to reach over $2 trillion by 2027, while the kosher market is also growing exponentially, especially in countries with diverse populations. This shows how these practices, which began as religious commandments, now have a global impact, influencing the economy, culture, and even food trends. And of course, we cannot forget the role of food as a tool for unity. In many cities around the world, interfaith events are using cuisine as a way to promote mutual understanding. Have you ever imagined attending a dinner where kosher, halal, and traditional Christian dishes are served side by side? This is the essence of what it means to find unity in diversity. But there is one final point I want to highlight. As much as food is a symbol of identity and faith, what really matters is how we use that identity to impact the world around us. Food traditions teach us to be more aware, more connected, and more grateful. And this lesson is something we can take beyond the table. As we conclude this video, I want to extend an invitation to you. Look at your next meal with different eyes. Think about where that food came from, the hands that prepared it, and the meanings it carries. Could the act of eating be a way to honor something greater, whether it be God, nature, or life itself? If you enjoyed this conversation, I have good news. This is just one of the many explorations we will undertake on this channel. There are so many other topics to discuss, from the history of other cultural traditions to how food influences our physical, emotional, and spiritual health. So, if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. Also, leave your like, because it really helps the channel grow, and share your opinion in the comments. What part impacted you the most? Have you ever participated in an event that connected different cultures through food? I really want to hear your stories. Thank you very much for being here with me until now. It is an honor to share this journey with you, and remember, each meal is an opportunity to celebrate who we are, learn about each other, and create a more united world. Until the next video.